All right, we're recording. Pick up my sticky note. Okay, so today we're going to see if we can consume the Rick and Morty API. That's going to cover Axios, event listeners, components, what I always like to call stuff from day one, which is your query selector and things like that. And then also console logging for fun and profit. You're going to find that console logs are one of many ways to debug an application. They're very handy, and I think they should be used more, especially when you're getting started and you don't know what's happening to a certain thing. So I guess what I've done is I've created a very small web application. So basically there's just an HTML file. Inside of the HTML file, we have some basic CSS. I'm loading up a script manually on the index.js, and I'm also adding in Axios here. And you probably won't have to do this on your sprint challenge, but this is just me being lazy and not trying to configure parcel so that it'll allow this as a module and allow me to use imports. This part here, you could probably just kind of ignore. But if you're making your own web page where you don't have like a server or anything else like that, that's configured to deal with your script being a module, then most of the time it's just faster to use what we would call a content delivery network, like a CDN. And so like if you were to look up Axios, I've already got it right here, from npmjs.com, then you can see that you can add in two different types of CDNs. You just need to select one, and that'll give you access to Axios without you importing it. If you're on your sprint, I think you just need to do an npm I Axios to get it in there. So npm install Axios, and then you should be able to either import or do the require Axios. Without further ado, I guess we'll get started. I do have some very minor CSS in here. So basically I've got, it's not a reset, but it's good enough for our purposes. And then I'm centering our container inside of the body, and making it so that it has a maximum width of 1024 pixels, just because I'm random like that. So our structure is a body, a div with a class container, and element names, header, main, and footer. Notice how there's no class name. So if we do a query selector, we're not going to be doing a query selector dot header, for an example, because there's no class on it. Kind of the idea here is that we're going to be going into the Rick and Morty API, which has all these little characters from the show. And what you can do is you can go to the rickandmortyapi.com and get information about this by clicking on docs. And then what we're looking for is we're going to be either getting a single character or getting all characters. Is everybody here really super familiar with like nesting objects or any of that kind of stuff, or do you guys need some work on that as well? I can cover that some more. You can come off mute if you want.
I wouldn't say super familiar.
Okay.
I don't know what you're entirely saying by nesting objects. I might know once you start doing it, but
okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by looking at get a single character. And so I'm just selecting this HTTP here. and I'm going to that web address. So this right here is basically what you're getting back from Axios, and this would be your res.data. If yours doesn't look like this when you put this in, let me copy this and put this over in the chat. I have an extension called JSON View, JSON-VUE, and it basically formats it so it doesn't look like a wall of text. So first off, you can always tell the difference between an array and an object because an array is square brackets, an object is curly brackets, right? So whenever I hear somebody saying nested array or nested object, this is a nested object here because it is, this object is called res.data. Then you can do res.data.origin, and you get this object. If you do res.data.origin.name, it would return with unknown. So that's what I mean by nesting objects.
Can you, I know this doesn't pertain to it, but what is the difference between an object and a class? Or is just a class just a collection of objects?
Well, an object is just kind of a way of storing things. I know that there's ways of you doing functions instead of objects and things like that, but a class is something a little bit more object oriented. It has other attributes that we're not really getting into right now, but we'll be using them more in Unit 3.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, does this dot and then the property, does that work on objects or is that only for classes?
This dot, yeah, it will work inside of an object as well, but typically what we use objects for is more for data storage than anything else. In other languages like Vue or something like that, you might be able to mutate existing state by using this, but in React we don't mutate state directly. So
okay, thank you. I was just wondering, like, the reason I asked was I was wondering if you could grab things out of the object by using this dot and then the property, because I didn't, the way I was using it wasn't really working in the project today, so I was wondering if it was even possible if I was just going down.
The problem is this deals with the scope that you are in. So like I think, like, I'd have to look it up, but I think that in URL, if we were to replace this string with like a function or something, then I could do this dot name and it would come up with unknown here, not Morty Smith, because it only deals with this object, not its parent object up here.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you wanted to access something, you always have to go back to, for an example, res.data.name. But if you wanted unknown, you had to do res.data.origin.name. So
okay, thank you. Gotcha.
It's a little different than dealing with classes, and I would say that classes in JavaScript are not as common anymore, unless you're working with some frameworks. But it's worth learning. There's a lot of rules to classes versus objects, and probably take me a little too much time to look up all the differences. But in general, what we're doing right now is we're only looking at getting the information from the object. We're not going to be mutating it or adding to it or deleting from it at this point. And that's all we're doing on the sprint as well, is we're just grabbing the information from it. So we only need to know how to access it, not really how to, like, spread it or deep copy or any of that kind of stuff. We can we can just access the information straight away. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this whole object here. And I'm sure y'all remember doing something like const data equals curly brackets, something like that, right? And so this would be like all the stuff that you did in Unit 1 or this previous week. And so let's see. This actually needs to be tabbed in further. 1 second. So this doesn't like name. Whatever. I'm going to save it and see what crashes. Yeah, see, it hasn't exploded or anything. So it's just mine's like complaining. My linter is saying that, you know, you're not supposed to be using these tag names. But oh well, whatever. I think I have TypeScript linting on, and I don't know why. But it'll be fine. So like if I wanted to console log data, for an example, right? I don't have this in auto refresh. Ooh, it didn't like that. Oh, yeah, it didn't like it. That is the problem. Oops, my bad. You have an object inside of an object, you need to have a key for it. All right. So now if I open this up, you can kind of see that same structure in my inspection tool, because I just console logged out this object, and the browser is allowing me to dig into which episode is which, what location. If I copy that and then paste it in here. Nope, that's not it. Come on now. Copy string contents. There. So there's good old Morty. Or not so good old Morty, actually, depending on which season you're looking at. So you can kind of see that this information is just fairly easy to access. So like if I wanted to do, you know, data.image, I could just do data.image. So we'll just save that. And you can see that we have data.image. Let's see. So that's kind of how you'll directly access what we're doing with Axios. So any questions on nesting objects? Speak up. Now's the time.
So with if you wanted to access other elements, would you? I know you can also do with the square bracket as well.
Yeah, you can also do square brackets. So like in square bracket notation, instead of having a dot, it has something like this. So like if I wanted to access the image key inside of the data, you would do it like that. So and it would do the exact same thing. And where this comes in handy is when you have something like you know, where it's in a string like this, and you have like a hyphen. And let me just make sure this didn't break. Yeah. So if we don't have this hyphen in there, if we have that hyphen in there and we don't have that square bracket notation, image 1 is probably going to break. It also, same thing with, yeah, see, it didn't like image 1. So it no longer gave me the information. Same thing with spaces. You know, if it was like image space 1, it's definitely gonna error and crash. So that's why you would have like the square bracket notation. So if you, oops, sorry, wrong button. And then we'll put this in quotes like that and refresh, and then we can access a key with a space in it, because the key is a string value instead of a I don't know, I guess a property value, a property name. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You said nested objects, but isn't that not that those last 2 examples weren't nested, were they?
Yeah. This like, let's say there was a location name. So you would do data dot. So that is a nested object because we're going into the data object, into the location object, then the name object. So if I refresh, see, it's a Citadel of Rick's. So it's going into the data object first, then we're using dot notation to get into location, and then using dot notation to get into the name.
Can you mix and match dot versus square brackets?
Sure. Yeah, so like let's do, oh, I need to put that in quotes. Yeah, like that.
Oh.
So data, no dot, square bracket, but we're using dot notation for dot name. But most of the time you're just going to see dot notation to the point where the next time that you see square bracket notation is probably going to be in React when we're dealing with forms.
Okay.
So like 2 weeks from now. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this just so we don't have like a really cluttered code base, if that's good with everybody.
You put it there just so we could play around with it, right?
Yeah, I just put it there so that we can play around with it and make sure that you're comfortable with the API and how to access that data. Because we're about to start getting into grabbing that data through Axios.
Okay, got it.
And mostly the first like 20 minutes is just dealing with getting used to how to look at this information and how to access it. So like location name, for an example, or you know, something else from here. You know, let's see if there's anything deeper than that. Origin unknown. We don't know where he's from. If we, since I've got Axios already set up, normally you're going to have to import Axios or do your require Axios, depending on the system that you're working with. It'll be the same way you did it today. I'm not totally sure which one Webpack is using on the sprint challenge. I didn't get a chance to go through it today, so I forget which one is which. But you sort of will get used to using both by the end of Unit 4. Import is more common in React, and require is more common in the backend stuff with Express. So typically the format that you're going to find on a lot of these JavaScripts is that you're going to have some sort of a module or a component, and you might see something like const header arrow function, I'm sorry, equals arrow function. And the header will usually be a component, and they're going to pass in a selector, which is just going to be a string. So what you might see is where they will call header or invoke header with a string of header, for an example. And that's just referring to this header here. And inside of the header, you're expected to do your query selector inside of there. So most of the time, if I have a new function, I'm always console logging whatever parameters are going into there, so I just can double check that they're working. So if I refresh, you can see we have header there. So we know that the selector is coming into that header as a string value of header. There's ways of checking to see if it's what you're expecting, but that's way beyond what we're doing right at the moment. So what you might do is have a, we might call this the parent element equals document dot query selector, and then we might do selector. So this allows us to change the placement of whatever we have in here. So like if I wanted to have header show up on the footer, I could just put in footer and it would mount it to the footer, or I can put it in 3 different places. So let me just make a new element for the H1 element. We're going to give it some text content. How come we missed the quotes? And we'll say Rick and Morty characters. And then we'll, I guess, append it to the parent element, for example. So this is all that unit 1 or unit 1 day 1 stuff where you're creating an element, you're putting in text content, and you're appending it as a child. So parent element dot append child, and we're going to append in the H1 to there. So if I save this and refresh, you've got your Rick and Morty characters in an H1. So if I inspect this, you can see that we've got the header, we have added an H1 to it. And let's say that we wanted to put this in 3 separate places. So we wanted to put that in main and footer. So we save it, refresh, and you can see that we have it in header, main, and footer because we've made this so this is a reusable component. So we're not dictating where header is. You know, better name for this might have been title or something like that, but it's best I could have come up with in the heat of the moment, right? So does anybody have any questions on this, the way that I've structured this, where I'm passing in a argument into the selector parameter and using the selector parameter and on this line? Anybody have questions on that?
I do. I think I know the answer. I just want to confirm it. So where you actually put in like the parentheses selector, if we're having multiple like parameters, like you want a selector and something else,
Yeah.
is that where you have to put like bracket notation within the parentheses if you want it, or why is that done sometimes and not others?
So if I wanted to put like an array inside of here, this is the way that this would be passed in. So this is an array with two strings in it. So if I console log my array, this right here is just an array that we're passing in. So if I save this and go back over to the console, you can see that the array is just here. And all I did was console log out this array here. Hopefully I haven't lost you.
No,
It's the
I
exact same.
I read the comment.
Same, yeah, it's the exact same way if you were to do like, I can spell today. Like.
And yeah, Spencer, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, so like your dog card maker, whenever you see that image URL comma breed, that is called destructuring. So let me give you one here. So we're gonna make an object here. Sorry. I can type today. So I'm just going to console log my object. And if we do something like new object, and we do say name Brian, age old, and hobbies, something like that, or hobby, singular, right? So we have like an object like that, and I pass it in here. Oh, come on now. Hit the caps lock. And we pass in, say, a new object into this. So this right here is going to be printed out right here, right? So it'll be my object, and it'll be an object with name, age, and hobby in there. So if I save that and I refresh, you can see that we have our name, age, and hobby in here. But if I wanted to do my object dot name, my object dot age, my object dot hobby. Come on. And I save this and I refresh. You can see Brian old JavaScript right here. So it has gone into the my object and then gotten name, gone into my object, gotten age, gone into my object, and then gotten my hobby. So that square or that notation where you see the curly brackets, this is destructuring. So let's say I only wanted name. What I can do is I can take this new object that's been passed in and ask for only name by doing it that way. So it's just grabbing this value out of this object.
Does it always have to be in the curly bracket?
If you want to make a new variable named name, sure.
Oh, and then I think I'm getting it wrong, because what I had was no selector and just the curly
Oh no,
bracket.
this is nothing to do with anything else, because on this one we got kind of sidetracked on what the curly brackets are. So like on this one, I'm designing this from scratch. So this isn't anything that you guys have seen today. This isn't based on it. It's something completely new.
I was just realizing that I figured out my question. Can you by name, can you put another variable there, like inside the curly bracket? Okay, that's what
so
I was.
age. And then we can console log age.
I think I just forgot that I saw the curly brackets because they sorry.
Yeah, so these curly brackets are just going directly into these curly brackets and grabbing the key and then turning into a variable called name, a variable called age. So you can access them directly. That's all that's doing.
Okay.
So essentially destructurization basically is just another form to write it in like dot notation. Because if I understand it correctly, you're writing it new object dot name and you're just calling it a different way.
Yep. Typically,
Okay.
I have a habit of trying never to teach that until later when you've struggled with props. Because props, this is just props, what we're doing. Everything you're seeing where you're passing in information is props. So everybody has this idea that props is something, that's built into React or something. You've been dealing with props ever since unit 1. Day 1, you've been dealing with props. So we just don't call them props because it's in JavaScript, not in React. It's just a name. So like, if I wanted to call it props here, that's basically what it is. But we're going to call it selector. So it's just a variable name. But I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this.
Is it only because there aren't any other keys called name, age, or hobby that you're able to do that?
Yeah, so like an object is what they would call an idempotent list. So you will never have 2 names or 2 ages because if you have another name, it overwrites the earliest one. So whatever the latest one wins.
Right, but no, what if you had another object that also had the same?
It would have to have the same shape. Otherwise, it'll give you an undefined because it doesn't exist.
Can you phrase that differently without?
So let's say that you have 2 objects. One of them has name, age, and JavaScript, and the other one has name, age, and occupation. So the JavaScript one, whatever the key, or hobby, the one that usually would say JavaScript, if you tried printing out the hobby one, the one where you passed in the occupation, you would get undefined because there is no hobby, because it has an occupation.
But what if you had 2 objects that both had hobby listed?
Yeah, then it's going to put in whatever the information is. So that's what we call the same shape of the data. It has the same shape of the data. It works exactly the same. So you can pass that information in, and like which we'll get into that here pretty soon, because we're going to be doing that in this project where we're going to be using a component that takes in a character, a single character, and then we're eventually going to get in and we're going to loop over that character, the character list, and output 20 characters instead of just 1 at a time. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't want to like belabor this too much, but so we can skip if I'm taking up too much time. But like you called out the key, but you didn't say which object it was. So that's why I was surprised that it worked.
Here, this is the object that we're talking about. So I'm passing a new object. But let's
say right. Okay, I get it now. Sorry, now I realized.
Let's say that I have a second one here, and we have Joe. He's young, and his hobby is cars, right? So if I wanted to, what I can do is I can do header, and then like, let's say I want to pass this in where the header is going to show up in the footer. And then I'm going to, instead of this calling this new object, I'm going to call this new object 2. Oops, sorry. Oh, come on. I'm on a keyboard that I'm not used to.
That's the worst.
I have to switch between like 3 different computers. So, all right. So now if I refresh, all right. So age is not defined. Let me see here. Oh, we haven't done this yet. So we're going to do, come on now. We're going to do name, age, and hobby. And we're going to print out name, age, and hobby. And then refresh. So you can see it's Brian, old JavaScript, Joe, young, cars. So this is passing in this object. It's destructuring out name, age, and hobby into new variables that we can directly access. So we just console logged out name, age, and hobby.
Okay, I've got it now. Thanks. That makes perfect sense.
Okay, cool. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to back out of this and start heading into the rest of the assignment. So that's not really an assignment.
Get information from an API. Do you have to save it in a const like
see, that's where we're starting to get into the weird JavaScript-y type stuff. You can. Getting it out of, say, Axios might be more trouble than it's worth, and requires more brain power than I probably have tonight. So we're just going to be doing, where inside of the .then we do all of the component stuff. So we're not going to try to save it outside of here. So like, we're not going to try to do, you know, like const data equals, you know,
yeah, I
like
meant doing it inside the .then. Do you have to save it inside the .then?
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you don't save it, then you can't access it. So like, if you just console logged it or whatever, it's just out there and on the screen. The computer doesn't know what to do with it. So by saving that data to something, then that's how you're able to access it. I mean, I guess if you're doing one thing to it, you could probably chain something to it, but it's probably not worth it.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
let me make sure I didn't break anything first. Okay, so we're back down to hello world, and we've got a header, and then we're going to do our main. So we're going to want to target this element here. So we'll start writing with a selector. And you probably will see something more like this, where you have your functions up top and then your invocations down at the bottom. I'm also going to convert this back over to, sorry. Arrow functions. I would highly suggest switching to arrow functions if you haven't. They're just so much nicer, especially when you get into a lot of verbose stuff. It also, technically to me, it makes more sense because this says, hey, I'm making a new variable named main, and I'm setting it to a function. To me, that just makes perfect sense. But and we'll pass this one to main. So we're going to be invoking the function main. We're going to be passing in main into selector, and I'm just going to console log the selector just to make sure that we're passing in what we're expecting. So we are. So like if you ever run into a function, you don't know what's going on, but you see, hey, they're giving you something like this, but you don't know what it is, just console log it. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? All right, so this is where we're gonna start doing our const parent element. And since this is scoped to main, so this new variable isn't available outside of here. So parent element doesn't exist except inside of main. And you're starting to see this pattern here where I'm using, parent element, and literally it's the exact same thing up here, but they're about to do two different things. So we're gonna select that. You can even console log your parent element, and it'll show you what your parent element looks like. We're going to do Axios now. So whenever I hear somebody say, hey, Axios get, this screen right here is a GET request. This screen right here is a GET request. This screen right here is a GET request. All a GET request is getting information from a server. You guys have been doing GET requests, my guess, your entire life or close to it. Anytime that you're asking a server for data, you're doing a GET request. So first website that you ever went to, that was a GET request. An app that you had on your phone, that was a GET request for you to download it, or for you to even look up the app that you want to download. All of those are GET requests. So when you see Axios get, all we're doing is we're just copying this and pasting it in here on a GET request. Now, we have res, which depending on who you ask, it's result or resolution or resolved or whatever. But I'm just going to console log res right quick just to see what happens. We'll refresh. Oh, that exploded. Let me see. Browser scripts cannot have imports or exports. Wait. See, I have that.
I thought it was
Auto.
rest with a P at the end.
Where?
When you're using then.
No, it's just res. So like result or whatever, but you could call this. You could call it banana. It's your word. You can say whatever it is. This is literally your, whenever you see a new function and you have parentheses like that, that is a parameter, and that parameter is yours to call it whatever you want. So like I could call this character if I wanted or whatever, but the naming convention is just to have it as res or result, or I've seen all kinds of things for it. All right, so we're console logging out just res, not res.data or anything else. And you'll notice that res is just an object here. So it's an object with data, status, all this other stuff in here. You can look in here. Most of the stuff I'm not interested in. I don't care about the request or the headers or the config or any of that. So most of the time, the meat that you want is actually in data. So you can just console log res.data. And then you can see that this is more interesting information. So you got res.data.name is Morty Smith. So if I do res.data.name, we're going to get Morty Smith out of that. Tell me I lost everybody. Come on.
Is this where, like right after this, is this where you're going to save the data to the const?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the next step. So basically what I'm doing is I'm looking and seeing where the information is. And so I think somebody was asking something about parsing information. This is part of parsing information. We're getting it down to only what we want in the format that we're expecting. That's all parsing means. So in this case, all we want is res.data because this is literally the entire information that we want for, say, like a character component. So what you would do is
So real quick, can I ask about that parsing you mentioned? So
yeah,
we don't have to use .parsing because the information is already in the format.
It's already in the format that we want. Yeah.
Okay, because .parsing, if we didn't use Axios, that's when we'd use .parsing, or am I?
Depends on the type of data that's coming down.
Okay.
In general, the type of data that you're going to be using in this is going to be Json format. And almost every API on the planet currently does JSON. Every public API that I've ever had to hit is JSON. There, you might find a few that only do like XML or worse, YAML. You might have to download an XML or YAML parser to get it into something you can use. But that's way beyond the scope of what we're doing here.
Cool.
So
makes sense.
All we're going to do is we're just going to do const data equals res.data. And it's the exact same thing that what we console logged here. One of the weird things about this is if you tried to console log data, especially in like a React app, you know, if you're storing this in state, it might not show up. There's reasons for it. It has to do with that the data is not available yet. So a lot of the times, instead of you trying to confirm that res data is data or that data is equal to res data, you just have to rely on this and say a console log statement. So we have that parent element, and what if we wanted to make an individual character making component? So it might be a good idea to pass in our data into here. And we're expecting it to be an object, right? So you might do something like run character data like that. And we could console log our object in here, save it. Let's see if this works before we go any further. So you can see this second one is actually going to be the one that we did on line 11. And this first one is this one. So since we already kind of know that that's the data that we want, you can see that we've got the information going into our character generator. And let's say that we just wanted, so we want name, for example. So we could destructure it. So we want name. Oh, alarm. We'll do gender.
Does it matter that const character is above main? Could it be underneath main and would it still work?
Yes, if it's a function. I think on an arrow function, it does matter on the order. This is just me doing programming for a long time. Anytime that I have something that's being accessed, it always goes on top of wherever I'm trying to access it from. But that's just a habit.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't matter the A to Z of these. It's more like where you access them from. But that's a habit from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I'm pretty sure that it has to be defined before this when it's in an arrow function. But if it's in a regular function, it's considered global and it's accessible like everywhere.
Okay.
Or everywhere in this file scope, I should say. So we've got so we got name, gender, species, spell that. S-P-E-C-I-E-S. S-C-I-E. Yeah, I had it close. And status sounds good, right? So let's do one of these cool little string things before we even start, appending child and all this other stuff. Let's have a little fun with this. So we'll say Morty Smith is a So if I refresh this, Morty Smith is a male human who is alive. Make sense? Or did I lose everybody? I prefer when I lose everybody. So the idea here is that we have passed in our res.data, which is just this stuff here. We have taken gender, species, status, and name out of this and passed it, or we've destructured those into new variables that we can access directly from this data object. So we're not taking in the entire data object in here. We're just taking in name, gender, species, and status. We're not, nothing else is going in. And we probably want image, right? So we'll do image because we'll be using that here in a second. So let's say that we have a new element for a card. So we've already shown you guys cards today, or maybe it was yesterday. I think it may have been today. So we'll just do a card. We're going to equal this to document.create element. And we're going to make this, I don't know, an article. Why not? If we have an article, we probably want an H2 because we've got a name. So that's a pretty good title. So oh, you guys are in for a treat next week when we start doing React. All of this stuff is just tedious in comparison to React. React is like writing HTML. It's so much nicer. We're probably going to want an image. We're probably going to want a p tag. All right, so we've got all these wonderful tags. Probably need to start appending those to our card. So we'll do, oh, sorry, card. Do an append child of H2. Do image. And a p tag. So if we do p.text content equals that.
What's the difference between text content and inner HTML? Is the inner HTML just literally putting it on the HTML page?
Inner HTML is evil and a very good way of getting your web page hacked.
Ooh, okay.
So on inner HTML, I can inject code into your website. Where text content, if you put HTML into a text content, it looks like HTML. It looks like HTML. It renders like somebody typed out HTML into a text editor. Where if in an inner HTML, if you have HTML in that, then it's going to run the HTML. So like if you have like a break or something like that. So the inner HTML should be avoided at all costs. It's a security risk basically.
Can you show how to add an attribute, like a link to like an H2? Because the inner HTML is how I used, how I added the attribute to mine. So I was just wondering another way.
Yeah, so on an H2, if you wanted to do a link inside of the H2, you would have an anchor tag inside of the H2, and then the content inside of the anchor tag would be the what you would have in there instead of in the H2. So the H2 would be blank for text content, but your anchor tag would be the one that you have your what do you call it? Or
the href, you mean?
Yeah,
like
the href. So, but yeah, we're about to get into that because like image needs to have like source and alt and things like that, right?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to do H2 text content, and we're just going to equal that to name. And then the last one that we're going to need to do is our image. So if we want to do source, and so our alt tag just is going to say name of who it is. And then we just return a card. So what you can do is you can console log this if you want and see what it returns. Let's see if it blows up. So we get an article with an H2, an image, and a P tag. So that works out nicely. But console log isn't exactly what we want to do. We would much prefer to grab this parent element and append child.
Hey, Brian, can I interrupt you for something?
Sure.
I don't know. I know might be kind of stupid, but I just want to know, like, try to talk to your thought process of basically like when you're going through the Axios stack get and you're basically invoking before you edited it out before when we were just calling character with the parameter data, how then that request knows to take the data because you stored it in res.data, but then if you look at the actual character function, how it's got the multiple parameters that of course are not data, but know how to like feed off of it, like
Yeah.
to feed off of res.data, but then use dot notation, I guess. How does the
So-
computer know how to do that?
That's part of destructuring. So like if I just called this, say data for an example, or data, you would have to do like data.name, data.gender, data.species, data.status, and then down here you'd have to do data. Yeah, I'm gonna go and just do like this. So this is the way that you do it if you don't know how to destructure. So you're passing in something. This data is literally the exact same information as what's in res.data.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we're passing it in to character as an object, and we're accessing it like data.name, data.gender, data.species. So we're using the dot notation to access that object's properties.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And let's see if I blew this up. Let's make sure this works. Okay, cool. So I actually did that right the first time. Yay me. And then we're just returning our card. So this is our article. So if I go over here and I inspect this, you can see that we have an article. We appended the H2, the image, the P tag. Then we put in our Morty Smith is a male human who is alive inside of the P tag. We then did Morty Smith. And then we made an image.source, which put in the image. We did image.alt, the alt tag, and just made it so his name. So that's this part here. So that's how you put in like an href or something like that. Any questions on what we've done so far? Because it's about to get more interesting.
Did you say with React, this will be a lot easier to
Oh yeah.
do? Okay.
Yeah, so like with React, it would be something more along the lines of this. Yeah, actually, I think I can. Article, come on. So it'd be something like return article. And then you would have your H2, and then this would be something like that. This is what, like a really quick and dirty example of what that would look like. It's a lot more like you're running HTML, but it's not. It's called JSX. So all of this stuff here is done inside of that, basically, except I didn't put an image or a P tag. Actually, this would need to have a curly bracket like that. So that's what JSX looks like. A general idea, not exact. So, but kind of read between the lines type of a thing.
Thank you.
And why do you need to learn this is what everybody else says at that point. And I can tell you that I've actually made more money doing this than I have with React, even though that's trending the other direction now, where React is making a lot more money than doing this stuff. So in the year and 2 months that I've been working doing development. Year and 2 weeks was doing this type of stuff. And CSS, like straight up CSS. So, but now we're moving into a different framework where we don't have to do this all manually. It was an absolute nightmare. But I can tell you that I made a lot of money doing this. So it's worth learning.
So I have a question regarding after the create element and after the append child. I see that in our other projects, we had to do class list. How come we didn't have to do it?
Because I'm not putting any classes in this. There's no style in it. So like you notice how article doesn't have a class on it, H2 doesn't have a class on it, image doesn't have a class on it, p tag doesn't have a class on it. That's just for styling reasons. You could still do class. You could still add things to your class list, and that's fine. You can even do your toggles and things like that. Oh yeah, I just noticed the the question in chat. Yeah, same shape means the same keys, so the same structure. Let me make sure this isn't broken. Okay, it's not broken. But like, let's say that we wanted to do, let me do. So yeah, class list dot add. So like, let's say that we wanted to have the image have a class list. So and we wanted to add in a class of YOLO. You only live once, right? So now when we look here, you can see that it added a class of YOLO. Make sense?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it just depends on how it's supposed to be structured. So we have it showing one character. What if we wanted to show multiple characters? This gets into what we just did today. If you notice, so I just go over here and I just delete the /2, and I just go to character. We're going to start getting into some weird stuff now. So if you notice, we've got this object, but there's only 2 keys. We've got result and info. So this is res.data, and it's no longer anything that's useful. So now we've got to actually dig deeper. So it's res.data.results. But if you notice, it's an array now. So we would have to loop over that array in order to generate these. So we can still use this character here. And we can even still have it with data and all that other stuff, but we have to match the shape of this information here that we pass in. We can't just pass in the array. So what we might have is back over here to the console, and I gotta undo this. So we'll console log here again and take a look at what a res data is. So you can see that it's got 2 keys, info and results. Info has information here that's useful if you wanted to do other things, like click on the next button here, or figure out how many pages there are if you wanted to do like a page counter or something. But results has, ID 2 is Morty Smith. So like just this one is what we're looking for. So this is res.data.results. So let's go to res.data.results. results. And you can see that, hold on, oh, dot results on both, sorry that. You can see that now it's just an array of 20 of these characters. So let's uncomment this right quick, and we're going to do data array 1, right? So we're just passing in the first element, or the second element in this array. So it should be Morty. We've got Morty. But if we wanted to go to, like, say, the 0th, like that, we should have Rick. And I could actually go through and we'll do oh, this one. The first 11 of these. You can see now I'm able to access all 11 of them because we're directly accessing it. But this is horrible. This isn't duplicatable. This is horrible. It's a lot of writing. What if you got a typo? Things like that. So typically what you would do is you would then maybe make a different component to house these. So maybe what we'll do is we'll do a characters component or character list. That's probably better. That sounds much nicer. And we'll use that same data. And we'll just console log. Console log data, right? So if I do character list, invoke it with data. So we're going to pass in data into here. I'm going to comment out this other console log since we're already there. And if I refresh this, you can see that we're passing in this array. Have I lost everybody yet? Anyone? Anyone? You can say yes, it's normal.
I don't know if I understand, but I don't know if I don't understand, if that makes sense.
Okay, so the idea that I have is that I want to house the character list in its own component. And then each one of the characters is generating one at a time based off of this component. So we're going to pass in data and we're going to be returning a component. So we'll just call this a section. Create. And we'll return. This is where it gets a little bit harder, but instead of me having like all these loops and whatever inside of the dot then, I'm moving it out of character list, and maybe character list can be called by something else. Like say that if we had like where you click onto the next one and it gets new data, it could update character list. Make sense?
Yeah, I think that does.
All right. So if I save this, refresh, and if we look inside of, well, let's see here, parent element, selector. Selector doesn't have anything in it, so it's probably not going to show anything. I'm just going to do some text content just to see if this is working. So we're going to do just see how this works. Oh, that's not working. So we've got character list, passing in data.
I think it's because text content just generates as black, doesn't it?
No, it's not showing up in our main at all here.
Oh, okay.
So let me see here. I may be. So we've got our parent element, document.query selector. Let me see if there's something in the console. Cannot access section before initialization. Oh, that's weird. Let's index.js line 35. Oh, yeah, right here. I don't have this wrapped in quotes. Yeah, see, mistakes can even happen. All right, so now we've got main. Refresh. What do we still have? Two. No, I'm just going to go do that. We already know that it's a that it's an array. We don't care what's in the array. And so we know that this is rendering to the screen. So if you notice, I'm doing like one change and I'm going back and I'm testing it because I want to know that this is actually putting in a section inside of main instead of writing an entire thing and wondering why it's broken because of reasons like me not putting quotes around section. So what we can do here is we can just do data.forEach. I like to use semantic naming on these. And then what we can do is we can run character. Well, we'll just say character data. We can run character with character data. So each one of these elements inside of data. So, no, that's not what I want. Where is that? Data. This thing here. We're wanting to get all of this information here into our character. The other thing that we want to do is we want to be able to append it to our section. So like that. So we're making a new section and we're returning the section, but not before we've gone through and looped over and added a whole bunch of children to it. And refresh. And now we have 20 of these characters in here. Hopefully that makes sense. Did I lose everybody?
I'm hanging in there. Thank you.
I haven't lost you though.
No, no,
Or maybe a little, but not too bad.
no, not too bad at all.
Could you use a for loop instead of a for each?
You technically could, yeah. For each is a little bit more, a little bit easier to understand. I know the for loop, yeah, you could technically do it with a for loop. But since we're not dealing with, you know, an index, we're dealing with kind of a snapshot of one loop through that array. You know, if you still needed like an index or something here, you could still do that with a for each by, you know, doing something like index like that, right?
I see. Thank you.
So there's just a lot of advantages to using a for each. A lot of the times it's more performant than a for loop, although that has been less and less over the years with better optimization of the web browser. It's just also stylistically a lot easier to read than a for loop. You don't have to worry about, oh, well, this is the length or whatever. But if you need to do something specific, like say you want to do like the pages, I think there's like 43 pages on this thing, then yeah, you'd probably want to do that. So what if we wanted to add in a button, maybe to get the previous and next? Maybe we might go into our header and do another Axios call in the header. It's still going to be the same Axios get as what we use down here. So I could probably just copy this for right now and then clear out some of this. We'll just do console log res dot data right here. Let me do. So we've got hello world. We're going to get rid of that one and that one. Let's see what other ones we have. So we're going to get rid of the character one as well. Just have it where our header Axios get is the only one that's in there. All right, so let me see here. See, it went in there and put this thing in here again. Something about Casey saying, hey, get rid of your auto imports. It's biting me. So let's take a look here and notice how we have info. There's 826 of these characters, 42 pages, but notice how this is a nice little link right here. That might be something that we might be interested in exploiting, because, you know, if I copy these string contents and I just paste this in, now we have different things where we have Aqua Morty as our first one, Aqua Rick, Arcade Alien, all of these other things. So there's more than one page. And if I go to like page 3 or page 4 or page 5, it's all different things in here. And if you notice, if I go back to page 1, previous is null. So what we can do is let's see if we can do res.data.info to reduce the amount of stuff that we're looking at. And we're only interested in next and previous, next and prev. So let's say we have so next is equal to res.info.next. And he's a little prettier. Something like that. So what you might be able to do is do a ternary on this. So we'll do, yeah, previous is the one that we would want first. So we'll say previous is equal to null. If it is equal to null, well, maybe we don't need to do a ternary on this. Maybe we can do an and. So let me see here. If previous is not null, nope, that would be not double equal to null. This is like an if statement ternary, where a question mark would have the question mark colon. So this is if previous does not equal null, do this. You can then start doing something like is it even gonna let me do that? 1 second. May have to put this in a if statement. Yeah, it's not liking me doing that, so I'm just gonna stop being fancy. I think this is probably going down the rabbit hole. I don't know necessarily that I think this probably have to be a button. There's also going to have to be some re-rendering and a few other little things. I think this is probably going this far down this rabbit hole is probably too far. Especially since I don't think there is actually any click events or anything else on the web page that you guys get to do on the sprint challenge. But it is nice to know event listeners. So maybe we'll just make something that toggles something. What do you guys think? Without going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Because it's going to be like, I don't know, 11 o'clock Eastern here in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, you read my mind.
I'm like, yeah, I could code all night if you guys want me to, but doing it in vanilla JavaScript is it requires a lot more thought than it does when we get into React. So it's not useless. It's just harder to do it in vanilla JavaScript or DOM manipulation. So let's do something like const button equals do a create element, we'll do a button. And I'm just going to move this up. We're going to do button text content is going to be click me. And then we will do parent element append child button. Make sure that goes up. Yeah, so we got a little click me button, does nothing. Pretty fancy. So if we did button dot add event listener, and we want to do like a click event, and whenever they click, what we might do is when they click it once, we're going to make it so that it changes the message. So button.text content equals there we go. Level of a dub. But it doesn't go back. This is where you might do something like toggler. It doesn't matter what it is. And you could say toggler. So we could actually just do a toggler because that's already a true, already does that. And then else. So what we're going to do is we are going to set toggler to not toggler. And then same thing with else. Actually, we're going to copy both of these. And this will be click me. Something like that. So click me. Oh, they exploded. Assignment to a constant. Yeah, this needs to be a let. Constant variable cannot change unless it's an object or something else like that. All right. So there's level of a dub. Click it again. Click me. Back and forth. Does that make sense? Pretty neat. I know some of you guys were struggling on the toggler.
I'm good. Makes sense to me.
So the not toggler basically it changes it from true to false or false to true, depending on which one you're clicking on. So I guess technically, if you want to make this more dry, you can move it down here and then delete this one. So once when it's done toggling, then it just does that. I think that'll also work. Yeah, also works. Oh, refresh. Now let's try it. Yeah, same thing. So that's an event listener. You'll be doing event listeners. They're going to be on clicks and on changes and on submits for like the next, what, 4 months? But yeah, you'll get used to it. So let's go through and do some styling because this thing's horrible. So one of the things that I've got is I've got this where it's like a constant width. And it doesn't ever go past 1024, but you know, it's not gonna be responsive or anything. So let's kind of try to change that a little bit, make it so it'll work on a phone or 1024 wide, right? So if I go into here and I start looking at my main, we have this section here with a bunch of articles. So what we might do is do a section selector. No class or anything on that because it's just a section. And let's do a display flex, which is going to make them line up in one line, which is horrible. And then let's do a flex wrap. Yeah, that's looking okay. And then we'll do a justify content. We'll do space evenly. Let's see how that looks. That's okay. Kind of weird that this line is a little bit weird, but whatever. I wonder if that's a photo size issue. Yeah, see this yeah, that's weird. Why would he do that? But you can also see when you go down to like a phone size, it also continues to wrap. All right, well, we'll go ahead and do something on the articles to make it so that these stay behaved. So in all of these articles, we'll just say, what's the image width on this? Expect it's 300. So we'll say a width of 300 on that and see if that fixes it. There we go. See, that's much better. Now they're behaving. What else I do, like space between might work a little bit better. See what that looks like when we I like space around better, or space evenly. Right. Yeah. That way it kind of keeps it centered. Any votes for changes to that structure? Or it looks good?
I think your change was better. Space evenly looked better to me too.
Oh, we want to do this on there. We'd also do that's horrible. Let's see here. Yeah, that does take an odd or an even. So what we could do is we can do something like article int child even. And we do a border, have a light gray, background color, and we'll do kind of a slightly different color, and then color, something like that. Oh, that's good. Got margin on the H1 or the H2. So let's see if we can do H2 margin 0. Adding. There we go. Oh, we're fine. When it doesn't bubble into the P tag, that's really weird. So article nth child should have the text background color a different color, but it's not working the way I want it to. No, of course not. I'm just going to get rid of this. Let's see what happens. Oh, yeah. And we can do a little border radius on this. It's really weird up here. That. There. Might do a little this. There. Oh, it doesn't look too bad. And then maybe some margin. So we want top and bottom, we'll say 8. Yeah, we'll just do something like this. You can even go into your iPhone SE. XR. Pro. See what it would look like on that. And we'll level it up. There we go. Any other questions? I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to stop the recording if nobody else has questions.
Is there a list of where we can see all the like methods and properties of, like, for example, document or like DOM?
Yeah, so you can do JS document. You'll see
like stuff we would use on a daily basis, because I know we've been using like certain ones.
So like you can see like child element count. You can figure out how many children elements there are. See what other ones are in here. I guess the font face set of the current document. Things like this are things that you can do, but pretty much the ones that you would be using are going to be your document create element, query selector all, maybe get element by ID seems to be pretty popular one as well. I'd have to look, but document is like one of the biggest ones because it deals with everything that deals with the DOM. But so you'd have to actually look at it. But yeah, so document create element, query selector will save your life. Query selector all is good for if you're trying to modify a lot of things, because query selector only gives you the first selector that it runs across. But it also can get tricky because it comes back as something that's kind of like an array. It's called a node list, which is loopable, but requires a little bit more planning. But in general, I would say the Mozilla developer documentation is probably, maybe it's a little dry. You'll get used to reading it the more you look at it. W3 Schools is another really good one. I think Microsoft also has another one as well. But you can see they have like it's organized a little bit better, where it says finding HTML element, changing HTML elements, adding and deleting elements, adding a event handler, finding object. So like they've got anchors, snippets, base URI, all this other stuff here. I'm sure they have more information on this as well, but it's, pretty much everything's going to be on either W3 Schools or on MDN, and it just depends on which one you prefer. I like MDN just because it just has a ton of information. W3 Schools also has a ton of information, and sometimes I'll go to that if I just need like a code example. They also have code snippets and things like that, so makes it pretty easy. But again, once we go into React, you'll use this less.
Oh, okay.
So like once when people get like next week on Thursday, I get people, why did we even learn week 1? It's because it's still valid in the market today. And there's a lot of companies that are still running vanilla JavaScript, including the one that I'm working for in the morning. Okay, any other questions? If not, then I'm going to stop recording and